Eric, were you surprised by the reaction to your comments about Rozier after the game?
Who?
Do you know who he is now?
I'm focused on this series, man. Boston.
Back in the summer of 2014, when Eric Bledsoe was in contract negotiations with the Phoenix Suns, LeBron James posted a picture of their workout together saying, "Bledsoe is a future All-Star," and said Phoenix needs to make it right with his contract number. That's what some NBA people thought at one point in time. Eric Bledsoe can become an All-Star, but he never became an All-Star over the course of his career with the Clippers, Suns, Bucks, and Pelicans. Let's talk about what happened and what his future in the league might be at 31 years old. Eric Bledsoe was drafted with the 18th pick by the LA Clippers back in 2010, and by his second year, he was already considered one of the better defensive guards in the league. He's 6'1", 215 pounds. He was a lot stronger and faster moving side to side than other people at his position. He could get up into people and control them, and then on offense, Bledsoe could use his strength to brush past guys getting to the rim. Back in those days, the Clippers' bench guard unit was pretty elite. They had Eric Bledsoe and Jamal Crawford, and it was a great pairing because you got the playmaking and scoring with Crawford and the defense with Bledsoe. His numbers weren't crazy or anything, but his on-court impact was there. Chris Paul knew Bledsoe had untapped potential and said this back in 2013. "I've said it all season long, I'm enjoying playing with Bledsoe right now because there's no way he can be here next year because we probably won't have enough money to pay him. He should be a starting point guard." Bledsoe was only there for 3 seasons, and the Clippers had to trade him because he was up for an extension. They needed to spend money at other positions, so he was traded to Phoenix in a 3-team deal back in 2013. Eric Bledsoe's first year in Phoenix was pretty interesting. Even though he got injured and only played 43 games, his on-court production made people say, okay, Eric Bledsoe might turn into a real player, and he clearly had another level to get to while sitting on the Clippers bench. Bledsoe broke out in his first year as a starter. Here's the list of players that scored at least 17 points, averaged 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.5 steals, while shooting 45% from the field during the 2013-2014 NBA season: LeBron James, Steph Curry, Chris Paul, James Harden, and Eric Bledsoe. It's an ESPN Stats and Info vibe, but you get the idea with the stat. All those guys are the main options on their team's offense, and then you got Eric Bledsoe, who was also putting up big numbers. No one was thinking superstar or lead guard on a conference finals team, but could he become a secondary option if he stayed healthy and you put the right pieces around him? He was one of the strongest defenders at point guard, a really good rebounder for his size, and could attack the paint. That's a strong combination of skills. But the Suns weren't exactly too excited in handing out a big contract extension, even after trading for him. It was reported they offered him a 4-year, $48 million deal. The concerns about Bledsoe was that he's not really the greatest passer, he overly relies on his athleticism, he's just an average to below average outside shooter. Can we really rely on him late in games? And not to mention, he's had lower body injuries. Plus, Goran Dragic was a better outside shooter and decision maker late in games than Bledsoe was. But they eventually did give him an extension. Phoenix gave him a 5-year, $70 million deal. The next 3 seasons of Phoenix Suns basketball was mostly depressing, strange, and mediocre. If you remember the next season in 2015, Phoenix's 3 best players were all point guards. At times, they threw out lineups with Goran Dragic, Eric Bledsoe, and Isaiah Thomas all on the floor. Phoenix was also trying to develop a young core with Devin Booker, Marquise Chriss, TJ Warren, Alex Len, and Dragan Bender. They also had Brandon Knight coming off the bench during this time. None of those young guys besides Booker and Warren turned out to be productive. They were awful and one of the 2 or 3 worst run franchises at the time. Bledsoe was also banged up with injuries and had to get surgery during these years. But as an individual player in 2017, he was coming off of a second year of averaging more than 20 points and 6 assists. He wasn't that true lead guard, but it was clear that he could help some other team as a number 2 or number 3 option. The final weeks of the Eric Bledsoe era with the Phoenix Suns was peak dysfunction. I honestly couldn't believe what was happening. On regular season opening night in October 2017, the Suns lost by 48 points against Portland, and then 3 days later, they lost by 42 against the Clippers. The day after losing by 42, Eric Bledsoe tweeted out the famous "I don't want to be here." That same day, the team also fired head coach Earl Watson, and the league fined Bledsoe $10,000 for the tweet. So why did he send that tweet? Well, there was a breaking point for him during that losing streak, because they did try to trade him over the summer. I believe it was Denver that tried trading him at the draft. Bledsoe was 27 years old at the time, and they had a bunch of young guys in Devin Booker, Josh Jackson, Dragan Bender, so he didn't really fit the timeline. When Bledsoe tweeted that out, the next day the Suns immediately got on the phones with other teams, but it was difficult to move him at first because his value was in the dirt. The Suns were trying to get a lot for him, but nobody wanted to give up a young player and a draft pick. About 2 weeks after that tweet, Phoenix sent him to Milwaukee for Greg Monroe and 2 second-round picks. The trade was looked at as a win for the Bucks by pretty much everybody. People knew that it was important for the Bucks to make a move like this because they needed another playmaker with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton. They needed someone at the guard spot who could get downhill and defend. Maybe in the East, Bledsoe could become a 1 or 2 time All-Star, who knows. And even though the Bucks were mostly mediocre in the 2017-2018 season, they finished as the 7th seed. Bledsoe had a pretty decent stretch of games going to the playoffs. In 25 games after the All-Star break, Bledsoe averaged 19 points, dished out 6 assists, was shooting 51% from the field, and shot 40% on threes, which was a really good number for him. But where Eric Bledsoe's career changed forever was during the 2018 Eastern Conference playoffs. They were the 7th seed against the Boston Celtics, but the Celtics were without Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving. Milwaukee had some matchup advantages, so them winning over the number 2 seed at the time wouldn't have been too crazy. The playoffs is where you see if someone can make adjustments on the fly against a team that is fully focused on stopping you. Eric Bledsoe did not make those adjustments. He got absolutely embarrassed by Terry Rozier. Before that year's playoffs, I don't really remember anyone saying Bledsoe was worse than Rozier, so it was pretty shocking to see him get outscored, out-assisted, and straight up outplayed on both ends of the court by Rozier. The funny thing about this series was, when Terry Rozier was talking about the Bucks roster to the media, he called Eric Bledsoe Drew Bledsoe, an old NFL quarterback for the New England Patriots.
Giannis, he loves to push the ball. Drew Bledsoe, he loves to push the ball. You got Chris Middleton, who makes tough shots, and we just try to limit them.
Not really sure if that was just a little jab or an accident, but here's what Eric Bledsoe said when he was asked about that and how the Bucks will stop Rozier after he had a big game.
Rozier's gotten off to a strong start to the series, no turnovers in 78 minutes. How personally do you take that matchup?
Who?
Terry Rozier.
I don't even know who that is.
You know, fortunately for Bledsoe, he was able to move past getting slapped up by Rozier the next season when he signed a 4-year extension in the middle of the 2019 season. The Bucks were dominating all year. Bledsoe was first team all defense and looked like a winning player. For the contract skeptics, there was a non-guaranteed option on the last year of the deal, so it was team friendly. But again, for a second year in a row, he was a joke in the playoffs. Against both the Raptors and the Celtics, he was a complete negative on offense. He wasn't closing games in the Raptors series because teams didn't respect his jump shot, or he would turn the ball over. He was not a reliable decision maker on a team that needed really good guard play next to Giannis. They were playing George Hill and Malcolm Brogdon late in games, and Brogdon was just coming back from an injury. It was clear that there's a ceiling with Bledsoe as one of your lead guards, even if he's having a good regular season. I also want to say really quick, Bledsoe deserved his All-NBA first-team defense spot that year. I've seen some people say he didn't, and I don't agree. If you want to say he should have been second team, fine, but he was on point defensively that whole regular season. The big problem here, though, was that the Bucks committed long-term money to Bledsoe in the middle of Giannis's prime years, and they chose Bledsoe over re-signing Malcolm Brogdon, who was a better player but was injury-prone. It's clear now that re-signing Brogdon should have been the priority. Giannis's free agency was coming up, so roster mistakes like this just increased the talk of, is Giannis going to leave in 2021? And the pressure of Giannis's free agency decision only got more intense after they lost again in the 2020 bubble playoffs. The Bucks lost in 5 games to the Miami Heat, a team they were heavily favored over. A lot of things went wrong, but this is an Eric Bledsoe video. For 2 playoff years in a row, Bledsoe shot under 25% from the three-point line. That's so unreliable, it's insane. Miami was letting him shoot, and that meant less driving lanes for Middleton and Giannis. Miami was able to use Bledsoe's defender as an extra defender on Giannis to make it hard for him to get into the paint. It was clear at that point the Bucks needed a new guard. This era was done. About 6 months ago, they traded Bledsoe and a bunch of first-round picks to New Orleans for Jrue Holiday. Where to start with the Bledsoe era in New Orleans? Well, they wanted to bring in veterans around their young stars and create a good defense with Lonzo and Bledsoe, but if you've been paying attention this year, they do not have a good defense. The Pelicans as a team have been a disappointment, and the biggest one is probably Eric Bledsoe. He was supposed to be the steady veteran guard who would help their defense, but he's been anything but reliable next to Zion and Ingram. That's not totally his fault, of course, but he's clearly taken a step back from his all-defensive days in Milwaukee. He's not really getting to the rim that much, and he's a slightly below average three-point shooter. He does have games where he goes off from three though. There's a little bit of external and internal pressure as well, because the Pelicans are trying to win. You don't hire Stan Van Gundy to tank, but at the same time, you want to play Kara Lewis and Nickeil Alexander-Walker so they can get reps, then that means you have to lessen Bledsoe's minutes. It's just a really awkward fit because he's not a lead guard, but he's also not a natural off-ball guard, even though shooting guard is his best position at this point. He looks checked out pretty much, and I don't blame him. He thought he was going to get traded at the deadline, and he's still on the team. Now, as I say all of this, Bledsoe has more than lived up to what his draft position was. He's had a pretty good career. You got to keep that perspective, but at the same time, this is now the second team in a row where he has not contributed to winning when it matters. I don't think he's done completely. He can still help someone in the regular season, but not with the Pelicans. I guess they try to trade him again this summer. I have no idea where though. And that's it for me. Appreciate it if you made it to the end of this one. Let me know how you're feeling about Eric Bledsoe down in the comments and what team you think the Pelicans will try to trade him to. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like as it does help the channel do better, and consider subscribing if you want to see more from me.